Senate Resolution 8659, honoring Senator Bill Ramos. The Secretary will read.
Whereas the Washington State Senate deeply mourns the sudden and heartbreaking loss of Senator Bill Ramos, who passed away unexpectedly on April 19, 2025, while on a trail run near his Issaquah home, doing what he loved, spending time in nature with his dog Sadie. And whereas Senator Ramos, raised in East Oakland, served with humility, joy, and fierce dedication. His career spanned city, state, and federal government, always rooted in a deep love for people and community. And whereas Senator Ramos served with distinction on the Issaquah City Council from 2016 to 2019, as a state representative from 2019 to 2025, and as a state senator from January 2025 until his very last day, representing the 5th legislative district, which stretches from Issaquah to Snoqualmie Pass and Enumclaw. And whereas prior to elected office, he served with the United States Forest Service, the United States Department of Transportation's Federal Transit Administration, where he worked closely with over 50 tribal nations to improve transportation equity and access in rural and tribal communities in Alaska and throughout the Pacific Northwest. And whereas Senator Ramos was a passionate and effective legislator and a champion for transportation equity, tribal sovereignty, and environmental stewardship. And whereas during his time in the State House, Senator Ramos chaired the State Government and Tribal Relations Committee and served as vice chair of the Latino Democratic Caucus. And in the Senate, he served as vice chair of the Senate Transportation Committee and as a member of the Senate Members of Color Caucus. And whereas Senator Ramos was deeply attuned to the struggles of his constituents, especially working families and the Latino community. And whereas Senator Ramos consistently approached every policy decision with an unwavering commitment to equity, tirelessly seeking solutions to uplift marginalized communities. And whereas for Senator Ramos, centering equity in his work was not a deliberate effort, but a natural extension of his character and values. And whereas beyond his titles and accomplishments, Senator Ramos was one of the kindest, most joyful souls to ever walk these halls. He was warm, generous, and full of light. He remembered your name. He shared his food. He lifted your spirits with his contagious laughter and unwavering optimism. His kindness was not performative. It was simply who he was. And whereas Senator Ramos was unapologetically Latino, proud of his Mexican heritage and always brought his full self into the spaces he occupied. He was a dancer, a forest ecologist, a planner, an amazing cook, a policymaker, and a beloved friend. He taught ballroom, salsa, and swing dancing for nearly 20 decades and infused every part of his life with music, joy, and community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Washington State Senate honor the life and legacy of Senator Bill Ramos with deepest gratitude and celebrate the extraordinary service, compassion, tenacity, and light he brought to this state and all who knew him. And be it further resolved that we carry his spirit forward in our work, our relationships, and our love for community, knowing that his legacy lives on in every life he touched, every trail he ran, and every corner of this state made better by his leadership. And be it further resolved that this resolution serve as a reminder to us all to live fully, serve with humility and joy, and meet each day with kindness, purpose, and love, as Senator Bill Ramos did. May we remember him always. May we carry his legacy forward, and may we honor him not only in our words, but the way we live our lives. And be it further resolved that copies of this resolution be immediately transmitted to his wife, Sarah Perry, his children Maya and Max, and the community he served with such pride and devotion.
Senator Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of Senate Resolution 8659.
Senator Valdez moves adoption of Senate Resolution 8659. Remarks, Senator Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, let me say the honor is mine to be able to speak here today on this resolution to honor our friend, Senator Bill Ramos. I first got to know then candidate Ramos back in 2018 as he was campaigning for the state legislature for the first time. I had an event in all places in the 31st district, a community, Latino community event out in Enumclaw, and there he was campaigning out there in Issaquah in the 5th district in North Bend, and he came all the way out there on this like over an hour and a half drive just to be there to meet the community, but also to support me. And I'll have a photo of that along with Senator Saldana and her family, and it's a photo that I just found last week as I was remembering Senator Ramos, and I'm just grateful that I have that. But that's when I first met him, and or around that time. And of course, I think for all of us here, Mr. President, when you first meet Bill Ramos, all you hear his laughter, but that smile, I mean, just so contagious about how happy he was wherever he went. Nothing ever could get him down, and there he was, just being Bill Ramos. And of course, when he got elected, he and I served together on the House Transportation Committee, and I immediately got him involved in some of the efforts that I do there. One of the passions that I have, Mr. President, of course, is helping our minority-owned businesses there in transportation. And I said, and I went up to then State Representative Ramos, hey, I could really use some partnership here, some help, trying to get some dollars and some programs established. And right away, he dove right on in and was a great help to me. And I really feel bad I felt bad actually when I came over here to the Senate, Mr. President, because Senator Elias, as Chair of Transportation, had to hear it from me, but then Representative Fye from the House had to hear it from Representative Ramos on all the efforts that we were fighting for. And I don't know how they have been able, they put up with us, but they did. Mr. President, as the more and more I got to know about Bill Ramos, of course, he loved being and proud being from East Oakland. He would always talk about that. And of course, anytime you got him to talk about his mom, I think she lived to be over 100 years old. She just passed away a couple years ago. I mean, you could just see how much he loved his mother. One thing you may not know about Bill Ramos, Mr. President, is that not only was he, was he Mexican, which he, of course, was very proud of, but actually he was a stealth Mexican. And he would just talk about that amongst friends, because, he was very light complexion. He used to joke about that. And he would just talk about he would tell stories out. He would just blend in sometimes, and he would hear things, but he would hear some awful things, because folks didn't realize his background because of his light complexion. But I think, as he would say, it further solidified how important his roots were and his background were, and how much it meant to him, to be Mexican. But he would just laugh about that. And he was very proud to be Latino and Mexican, Mr. President. He had artifacts from the CIMAR, Chicano Latino Cultural Center, in his office when he first got elected. And I remember when I was in the House, and we had offices right across the hallways there in the O'Brien building, and he saw me and he pulled me over. He goes, Javier, I really have to show you what I got. He would show me these artifacts. He was just so proud to display them about, again, really displaying, talking about his roots and his culture. And then the same thing happened actually just a couple months ago in January, when I was here walking the floors here upstairs on the 4th floor of this building, and he wanted to show me his new office, and he had some new artwork, Mr. President, that he had obtained from the Cultural Center Arts Gallery there in Burien, on this big picture and poster of this pan dulce, which is a Mexican sweetbread. Again, it reminded him of him when he was young, and he used to eat a lot of that. And of course, you may recall, Mr. President, when he passed his first bill here in this body a few months ago, the gift that he gave to all of us was pan dulce, because he just wanted, to him, that was a part of him. And he wanted us all to share that with him. Senator Ramos was very proud, as the resolution talked about that he was a founding member of our Latino caucus here in the legislature. He talked about that all the time. I mean, he just couldn't, left and right, talked about that. And I don't think he ever missed a meeting, Mr. President. I think he was there every single time. And so, Mr. President, what else can you say about not only a friend, a colleague, someone who day in and day out just brought happiness and joy to this building? And as you know, Mr. President, sometimes there are good days in this building, there's great days in this building. Sometimes days here are just not the best. Things just may not go right one day, or it's just one of those tough days. But Mr. President, every day he was here with that smile and like, yep, I got your back. We got you. That's the kind of person Senator Bill Ramos was. And so, Mr. President, there was no bigger cheerleader, at least in our caucus room, I think for all of us here, than Senator Ramos. He was our biggest cheerleader for each and every one of us. And so, all I ask, Mr. President, as we're here for Sine Die here tonight, that when we walk out of these doors if you can just say one last, I gotcha. One last, I gotcha. In memory of our friend, Senator Bill Ramos. I just think that'll go a long way. So thank you, Mr. President.
Further remarks? Senator Gaynor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do stand in support of this resolution. And I think back to the first year I came in as a freshman legislator. Senator Ramos was coming in too, and a couple older guys. He's not quite as old as I am, but we felt like we've been other places in life. And my first thought of Bill was, well, he's from Issaquah. I'm from Eastern Washington. At that time, my district was totally Eastern Washington, and he was Issaquah and King County. And I don't know if you realize that sometimes from Eastern Washington, you have preconceived notions of what King County people think. So it was kind of, an awareness along the way that in talking with Bill, that we had a lot more in common than I realized. I mean, he was a Forest Service guy, but I was a guy that worked in the woods, obviously in the private sector, which was usually not in lockstep with the Forest Service, but I didn't hold that against him. He was a DOT guy, which, was kind of neat to just kind of understand his background and what he brought to the conversations that we had as we served on the Transportation Committee. But we also had opportunities to work together on legislation. And that wasn't really something that we sought out. It just happened to be that we had, in our talking, we had similar interests about the one thing that we did together that was not transportation, had to do with adult homes and getting a tax break for them. Just made good sense, and Bill and I were able to work together to get that legislation through. We had another opportunity on a transportation issue to work together. And as the relationship developed, as I said, you realize how much more you have in common than what you initially think. But I really appreciated being able to work with Bill and to, trust his background, I guess, to bring a different perspective to mine, to my thinking. And so, something I've always valued is being able to hear, other perspectives and hopefully, sharpen my thoughts and my, philosophies. And now as my relationship with him as Senator Ramos here serving on the Transportation Budget Cabinet, I mean, it was just good we met quite often. And I didn't realize I was into that kind of commitment when I was asked to do that, but it gave us an opportunity to really bond. And his conversation for us, the two of us being the junior ranking, we were the junior woodchucks because we were carrying the heavy lumber for the big guys. But here we were, the older guys I'm not as old as Senator King, but that's enough. I'm sorry, I did not mean to impugn. I was total respect for the elderly in this body. The one other comment I wanted to make, though, is that when I talked about how I came in to the legislature and the 5th and the 12th, we weren't together, but as we had a redistricting, we had an opportunity to actually share common communities. And that also, gave us a chance to really kind of focus in on the people that we represent. And Sarah, too, I mean, being the King County Councilwoman that's representing our area, had the opportunity to talk and work with her. And so I had a great appreciation just for the relationship that we could have together. But I will say that although I support this, I'm very saddened because of what we've lost. It seems like it was definitely a life that was lost too soon. I mean, Bill had so much he had so much energy. And when you think of him running up 70 stories, I think, well, I'm glad you did it, Bill. but I know I would have been following quite a ways behind, but he was always trying to be at that head of the pack, and I appreciate his industriousness, his willingness to tackle anything, because just the short time that I've known him these last few years, it's pretty apparent that he was really committed to the work that he was doing. And I really, as I said, it is with regret that we have to do this today, but it's also an honor and privilege to give homage to someone who I did not get to know well enough, but I certainly appreciated the time that I did.
Further remarks? Senator Benke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Senator Valdez for running this, because it means a lot about a gentleman who, like Senator Gaynor mentioned, we had a big freshman class coming into the House, and Speaker Jenkins probably remembers us all coming through there. So it was kind of a motley crew of all of us from different parts of the states coming together. And Bill was one of those that really appreciate the idea that we can build relationships from day one. And I think that's the bonding part that you mentioned the other night about we're in this together. We may be debating, we may be very passionate and energetic about a lot of things that go on in this building. But at the end of the day, we build these bonds that we're going to create for generations, and we'll never forget Bill. One thing I remember with Bill, though, working with him not only in the House but in the Senate, we had a real awkward sense of humor, as you know about myself as well, Mr. President. And when Senator Shoemake and I saw, as ranking member and chair in the Energy and Environment Technology Committee, and saw this dig bill coming in front of us, and we started going in through this complex nature of what the bill was, and Bill literally dug into it, pun intended. He really worked hard on these things, and we started going through this, and we even coined the hearing. We had Dig Day in the Senate committee that day. And Bill was leading that effort. He knew all the different parts of the issues, the policies, all the different stakeholders. And as he worked that bill, it showed that part of what true legislator he is and what that legacy that he is leaving with the rest of us. And those lessons will always remain with me. Even to the point when we were on the floor, I said, hey, we're all on board this. Do you mind if I have a little fun? And I figured you knew that was coming when Senator Shoemake announced this, and I won't use her words, but the puns started flowing a little bit more when we get together, and it just came to that light and that laughter and that kindness that I'll always remember, and really the smile that I think is a legacy that he'll leave with us forever and ever. So appreciate this.
Further remarks? Senator Shoemake.
Thank you, Mr. President. I started with, back then we were Rep. Gaynor and Rep. Benke and Rep. Shoemake and Rep. Ramos. We started together in 2019. And I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on the last few days is that Bill stood up for his constituents, he stood up for his background, but he also stood up for women. Because this is one of those places where we have so many conflicts with one another. It can be on policy, it can be on the politics, it can be what I need to do for my district or yours. And when those tensions are so high, it's easy to be jerks to one another. And I can think of multiple times when someone treated me in a way where I didn't know if it was me or I didn't know it was them, and Bill saw it and he was like, Sharon, that wasn't right. And sometimes you need someone to point that out to you. I've seen him do it for others as well. I had a friend who had an experience this last summer, and Bill was the one who told me about it and told me that it was wrong and helped me understand it, and we've been supporting her that way. And so I think it's not just, it's so many people that he does this for, and this was just so fundamentally who he was. And I think that that's one of the reasons that maybe the joy is more than just a smile. We talked about how on Saturday, every single one of us, when we spoke about it, had a story of Bill where he was kind and he was warming and he saw us. And I just think that's who he was. And we're gonna really miss him. And I don't know who's gonna fill that space, but I hope that, just like Senator Valdez said, I got you. I hope we can do that for each other.
Senator Levick.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise in support of this resolution honoring Bill Ramos. And I spoke with his wife, Sarah, last night, and she wanted me to let all of you know that she absolutely appreciates the outpouring of love that has come to her family. And Mr. President, Bill would call me all the time, and he would start every conversation out with, "Hey, John, this is Bill." And I kept telling him, I could see your name on my phone. But, Mr. President, I promised his wife, Sarah, last night that I would not cry today. And I promised myself that I would not cry today. And, Mr. President, I know that a lot of us have been crying lately, and we've had some difficult days. And I was reading a quote this morning as I was out on my morning walk. And the quote said, it was a quote about kindness. It said, "Be kind whenever possible. It is always possible." Senator Ramos had to be one of the kindest people I've ever met. And I want to share a quick story with you, Mr. President. You probably know, Mr. President, on November 15th, I had a total left knee replacement based on some injuries I received in the military and during my time as a state trooper. And so a few weeks later, we had to come to Olympia for committee days. And I got a ride from my good friend, Senator Wilson. I took light rail, and Bill found out I was here, and I had to go to a couple of events that night. And he wanted to know, "Where are you going tonight?" I said, "Well, I'm going to an off-campus event." He took me to the event. He had already checked with my staff to see where I needed to go for my next event. And I said, "Well, are you going to stay here?" He said, "Yes, I'm going to stay here until you are done. Then I'm going to take you to your next event." I said, "Bill, you can't do that." And then he said, "And I know where you're staying tonight, so I'm going to take you to that, and I'll pick you up in the morning." That's kindness. That is kindness, always finding a way to be kind. And Mr. President, the last time he and I talked, he mentioned to me, he said, "We're going to be going to a few events this year, and let's travel together." And he said, "Let's call each other a lot more." So, Mr. President, I'm going to say this to you. Bill can't call me, but I can always call him. "Hey, Bill, this is John."
Further remarks, Senator Saldana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in strong support of Senate Resolution 8659. And we've shared together on this floor on Saturday and again in our caucus room, and I can't remember what stories are told where. And so, but I do want to stand up and just take a moment to give gratitude. I wore this suit on Sine Die because Bill tied this tie for me. And it's a little crooked, which is why I keep it buttoned up, because the one on the inside is a little bit too long. But I just tuck it in, and I don't want to untie it to tie it properly, because it really meant a lot to me. Bill is just a little bit younger than my own father, and we've been good friends. And one thing that Bill shared with me, and now that we're on this side together, is I got to hear more about his family, about how proud he was to be the son of a cosmetologist and hairdresser from East Oakland, and how proud he was of having 19 weeks worth of ties, and many of them retro ties that were his father's. And those ties are a little bit shorter. They have amazing prints on, and he always wears that little pearl in the middle of his tie. And so he'd always, share with me, when he was wearing one of his dad's ties. Everyone has spoken about how kind he is, how fiercely loyal he is, how he will get angry and enraged about injustices that he sees others experiencing. And I have been really lucky to have him always on my side. I've had the honor, as many of us have, of being invited to his family home and meeting his dog, Sadie, and being fed by him. And it has been a tragedy, but also a blessing to be able to have his presence so powerfully here with us, and reminding all of us in the midst of our hardest times to be kind, to be courageous, to make sure that we get our steps in. And so I have been honoring him by doubling down on bringing my tennis shoes here more often and making sure that I'm walking and enjoying this most beautiful place that we had to call home here on this, in this Puget Sound region, in this Washington state, among these trees and the waters and our salmon. And I don't take it for granted. And I know many of us have been making sure that we are keeping our eyes wide open and enjoying the miracles that are here around us and those that we get to go home to every night and hold and embrace. So, Bill Ramos, I'm so grateful for your friendship, for your presence, and being able to keep you alive here in this chamber.
Further remarks, Senator Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rising in support of this resolution and in deep sadness over the loss of Bill Ramos. Senator Valdez mentioned how proud Senator Ramos was to be part of the Latino Democratic Caucus, the founding Latino Democratic Caucus. But it was more than him being proud of being part of that caucus. He really was unwavering in his commitment to the Latino community and honestly quite brave in his advocacy for the Latino community as it related to representation and advocating for diversity and supporting immigrant communities and speaking up against discrimination and empowering communities. And I know that the energy and legacy that he will leave as an advocate for Latino communities in Washington will be really profound. As I have said, unfortunately, too many times on this floor this session, to Sarah and to everyone here, may his memory be a blessing.
Senator Riccelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I made no promises to Sarah, so I'm gonna try and keep it together as far as keeping my emotions in check. But this has been a tough session on all fronts. It was so exciting to come over to this place with Bill and his enthusiasm, and part of those members that came over from the other body and recognizing the support here today in this chamber is really meaningful. But what we're hearing about in this really challenging place, this really tough time, got to take a moment for the caretakers, and they're amongst us. We all got to take care of each other. And what's getting me today is that Bill Ramos, on day 1 of legislative session and day 105, would have the same energy, smile, and care. And we need this around this place. And it is unfair that after such a challenging session, that we don't get to benefit from that light, that enthusiasm that he brought to his work and to the people around him. And for his honor, we have to move these people around us that move so with their hearts for the folks around them. And we keep them in the shadows because we have to move through the orders of business to the grind of this place. And so on the last day, it seems so appropriate to take a moment and just really think about someone like Bill, who made this place work, because if people like that didn't exist, if Bill didn't do what he did, we would fall apart. And we owe it to all of ourselves. Think about that when we return to do our work, because we can be better for each other. This Senate floor has endured a lot in the last 8 days. This legislature has endured a lot. And we care about the work. We come at it from different ways, but we are human beings, and Bill Ramos put that first. And that's what I'm going to think about today as we close out business, how I can be better in the interim checking out. And that's not just checking out on Senate members or House members or Democrats. Everybody, my Republican colleagues, we can do better for Bill. And I think he would want us, and we should hold ourselves to his standard. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of this resolution. I didn't know Bill Ramos very well. I just knew he was a very, very nice guy. Last Saturday morning, he came over to my desk, knelt down right here, and he said, we need to work for our Snoqualmie community. Snoqualmie is intersected by King County. One side is District 13, the other side is the 5th District. And he said, we need to help that small community because they do have challenges with growth and other issues. And so we talked a little bit about what we could do for our joint community. And he said, you know, my wife could really help with us too, because she's part of King County. You know, he was very, very proud of what his wife could do for our mutual districts, our mutual community. And I could see that excitement that's been spoken about on the floor here today, that what we could do together. And I pledge to keep that in mind going forward. What would Bill do for this community? And I will hopefully get to meet his wife someday, that we can work together for that community. So thank you very much for bringing this resolution forward.
Further remarks, Senator Orwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to stand in support of our dear colleague and friend, Bill Ramos. You know, it is Sine Die, and it's maybe fitting because Bill made all of us shine. I think a sign of a true leader is helping others lead, and I think we all have stories of a day we were struggling, a day we were down, and there was Bill. We were very excited to serve together in the Senate. His office is next to mine. We sat next to each other. And he's like, are you going to get tired of me? That could never happen. That smile, that laugh, his laughter was so contagious. And, you know, he was just an inspiration to us all. And when I think about him, I think about love as an action. He was a person of so many small acts of kindness. He showed such enormous love for his community and all of us, his family. Sarah was the love of his life. He talked about her all the time. I remember we would talk about doing things in the summer. He's like, I got to talk to Sarah. We'd see each other at events, and let's get a picture. Let's talk to Sarah. Well, what a beautiful example for all of us to love those around us and to support each other. And we're all going to miss him so much. Thank you.
Senator Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for certainly support Resolution 8659. I served with Bill in the House and served with him here. And as we started session this year, I was at the sundial and Bill was there and he grabbed me. He says, hey, Paul, I got a little bill that deals with digging and putting in lines and stuff. And like, would you sign on to this? And, you know, I've been in the legislature 15 years and many of the House members know I don't read stuff. I just sign it. And I said, sure, Bill. I mean, it's just got to be a simple little bill, right? And Bill said, yeah, this is really simple, Paul. It's going to have no problems, and it's really, everybody's going to like it. And I thought, yeah, okay. And everybody didn't like it. And so the Bill would call me. And Bill would call and says, you know, Paul, that simple bill. I says, yeah, Bill, well, it's turned into be kind of a mess. And I go, well, it'll all, and then I was the one that says, that Bill, it's all good. We'll all work out. And it did, you know, legislation always does. It's always murky. And, but then I thought, as it's been a really difficult session for the Senate, for life. And I should have known Bill better. I mean, he trusted me, and I trusted him, and I truly did, and I truly do. But as I look at his resume, I wish he could have taught me to dance. And maybe I could have helped him with some music. We're in interesting jobs here. We're in parties. We have fashions. We have all sorts of things. And I listened to Marcus, and I kind of agree. We need to be kinder to each other. We need to show grace to each other. And we have a life certainly out of here. So my dealings with Bill were mostly here. And he was always happy. He trusted me, and I trusted him. Thank you.
Senator Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to honor Bill Ramos and Senate Resolution 8659. As one of the newest members of the Senate, I remember coming in, nervous, right? You don't know what to expect. And I'll never forget one of the friendly faces that I saw when we first started session was, Senator Ramos. And I remember one of the first things he wanted to do is he wanted to sit down and chat with me, talk to me about not just legislative issues, but talk to me about me, get to know each other. We spent over an hour in my office. He came to my office, and I remember telling Bill, I said, Bill, that gift that you gave to everybody when you passed your first bill in the Senate, you called them, conchas. And I said, when I grew up, we called them pan dulce. And we kind of both chuckled, and we started talking about our shared, experiences in life, and where I grew up and where he grew up, and some of the commonalities that we had. And as we sat there and we talked and laughed and just got to know each other on a really, really personal level, I started to feel like I was discovering a family member that I never knew existed, right? And that gave way to a beautiful friendship that I started establishing with Bill. He always asked me how I was doing, if he could help. Always was, as others have already said, always was kind and cheerful. Even I had a license plate bill that wasn't really going anywhere, and I'll never forget Bill pulling me into his office, and he's like, so that licensing bill, I have an idea. And he said, well, this is what we're going to do. And I said, Bill, we need to put your name on it then, because you're doing all this work. He goes, no. This is your bill. He goes, we're going to work together, but I'm going to make sure we get it across the finish line. And that's just the kind of guy he was. When I got elected as mayor, I remember telling a reporter that he said, what are some of the things you want to accomplish as mayor? And I said, well, first of all, I want to provide windows and mirrors to other kids that they could see somebody that looks like them, sounds like them, has a funny sounding last name like them. They could say, oh, if he did it, I can do it, right? And it was so assuring that when I came into the Senate, I was, welcomed with open arms by not just everybody and on both sides of the aisle, but especially, people like, Senator Valdez or, Senator Saldana or, Senator Alvarado and Senator Ramos. I remember Senator Ramos saying, Adrian, you're going to be a part of the Latino caucus. You're part of the family now. And it just felt so good to have somebody that knew that they were going to be there for you. They were going to support you in every way they can. And so I will truly miss him. and I will try to live up to the ideals that he had, the kindness that he had, and try to do good in my days on here in the Senate as a tribute to Bill Ramos. Thank you.
Senator Wilson Claire.
So, Bill Ramos was short on stature, but he had a tall personality. And he was one of the very few on this floor that I could really look eye to eye with. There is joy, and there was joy in the corner in Ledge 405, which is his office. And as you heard from Senator Orwell, it was Orwell, Ramos, and Wilson C. in that corner. And it was Orwell, Ramos, and Wilson C. here on the floor. And Ramos will always be to my right. He did have your back. And when he said it, he meant it. And his votes were about his heart and about the people. And, you know, I grew up and my mom taught me two things. There's good in everyone and everything, and the glass is always half full. And when I think about Bill Ramos, I think about good in everyone and everything, and I think his glass was always half full. And I also want to mention Corey and Thomas upstairs, who are in an empty office right now holding down our fort, and was able to go talk with them this morning and give Corey a big old hug and ask him if he was okay and how he was doing, because as you well know, the loss of Senator Ramos ripples. And it was just not his friends and family, but anyone, I think, that he has made contact with in his time here on the Senate, but clearly his time in the House as well. We both came in 2018, and so I met him on the campaign trail, and we spent a lot of time eating food we didn't like and shaking hands and talking to people we didn't know. And what we knew is when we got here, they'd call us representative and senator because they didn't really know our names, but they knew they should. And that's kind of how we walk this world. And Bill was humble, sincere, kind. He had integrity beyond what most people have. And his wife is a treasure as well. And I know Sarah and the kids will miss him. And she just needs to know we will miss him as well. And we will continue to do good things. The last thing I'll say is don't wait. Bill and I had a transpo, that dang license plate bill that Senator Cortez was talking about. And I had an amendment and he had one too. And I didn't like his and he didn't like mine. And so we went up to the bench and asked to take both amendments out and to throw them away and that we would work on them on Monday. And Monday came and there was no amendment, no new amendment. And Bill's bill is Bill's bill. But we'll continue to work on it and we will fix it next session. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Leas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I met Senator Ramos many years ago, and I can't actually remember where we first met. I don't remember some of those early interactions, but I remember when we became friends. And it was on November 19th. Our caucus had selected Senator Ramos and I to work together on transportation. And I decided we should get together, so we scheduled a 1-hour meeting at Bill's home. It's also the first time and only time I got to meet Sadie during that meeting. Well, that 1-hour meeting turned into a 3-hour meeting, and I was late for dinner as a result of it. And in that one that became 3-hour meeting, I discovered what everybody discovers: the heart of kindness, the deep passion for public service that Senator Ramos had, the mischievous delight in making good things happen for the people, sometimes not always telling the full story if we could get something good done. After that meeting, the next opportunity I had to really continue that conversation was at our caucus retreat in December. And I shared this story with our caucus. I am not a big fan of icebreakers. And I very reluctantly participated in Senator Lovett's icebreaker that day. And it was an excruciating icebreaker because the assignment was you had to pick a partner, and Bill and I paired up, and you had to listen to them talk for, I think, 5 minutes, and you couldn't say anything. You just had to listen for the full 5 minutes, which for Bill and I was a nearly impossible task. We both looked like volcanoes waiting to erupt during our 5 minutes, but I learned so much about Bill in that 5 minutes. I learned about how he was from the East Bay, and I learned about his family roots. I heard about his family. He's Bill Ramos III, and I learned about Bill Ramos and Bill Ramos II. I learned about his deep, deep love for Sarah. And Bill and Sarah met later in life, just like my partner and I have. And it just gave me so much hope that finding love partway through your life could endure. And my heart just breaks for Sarah, because I know how special that relationship was to both of them. Then carry on to session. Bill was a member of our transportation budget cabinet. And what I discovered was just how funny Bill was. Our meetings, we frequently sort of lost track of our task because we were having too much fun. Senator Gaynor alluded to this incredibly disrespectful joke I made about how these two nearly 70-year-old legislators who were new to my committee were the junior woodchucks. I'm sorry, I watched DuckTales too much, and so I called them the Junior Woodchucks. And to Bill's eternal credit, he wouldn't give the nickname up. I didn't want to use it anymore. I was like, this isn't a nice thing to say. And there was a particular bill they were working on, and the moment it passed the House, he said, hey, the Junior Woodchuck bill passed today. And that was just, his sense of humor, his sense of grace, his sense of care. He also really, to me, inhabited what it means to be a citizen legislator. I came to this place in my 20s. I, for whatever defect of my character, wanted to be in public service from a very young age. Bill had never had any design or desire to run for public office. He got pulled in because he saw problems in his community that he wanted to solve. And he served on the city council. Well, first on some advisory committees, then on the city council, and only very reluctantly was talked into running for the legislature because he was convinced that he could make a difference. And I think all of us here can connect with that spirit of Bill Ramos. It isn't about us, it isn't about our title, it's about what we can solve and the problems we can solve and the people that we can bring together. He was truly a bridge builder. He brought people together. The gallery is full of members of the House of Representatives. He literally has brought us together today. I haven't seen members of the House of Representatives in the gallery on Sine Die in my 18 years. Bill has brought us into this room together, and we see beautiful Speaker Jenkins on the rostrum. He is right in this moment bringing us together and creating a sense of community as we grapple with this moment. He did that on issue after issue. Mr. President, you'll have to excuse me, but there was one front porch in the state of Washington in 2020 that had Leas for Lieutenant Governor signs and Heck for Lieutenant Governor signs. And that was because Bill hosted signs for people in the community. And if you wanted one, you could come get them there. He literally brought you and I together in a difficult moment, Mr. President.
The work in progress.
He was also a tremendous problem solver. I remember when I asked him to help on the license plate bill, and he looked at me kind of like when you put a prize champion racehorse into a pony race, like, you want me to work on a license plate bill? I was like, I know, Bill, but we've been working on this issue for 5 years and we haven't been able to figure it out. So this is the year. And to his credit, he worked with Senator Cortez, so many others, and got the bill done. But this was an example of, it didn't matter what his ego was, what the size of the problem was. If there was a problem that needed to be solved, he was there. And I just want to end with the last conversation I was blessed to ever have with Bill. It was right over there. last Saturday afternoon, and he asked me the same series of questions he asked me at the end of every floor session. He knew that Representative Fye and I were in the midst of a tough negotiation on the transportation budget, and he said, how's it going? Second question was, how's Jake? How's that going? Then he said, what do you need? And then he closed with, how can I help? Mr. President, Bill Ramos represented the very best of us. Bill Ramos made us all better. And Bill Ramos made Washington better. Thank you, Mr. President.
If there are no further remarks, the question for the Senate is adoption of Senate Resolution 8659. As many are in favor, will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Senator Ramos, Bill, vaya con Dios.